somebody most of us all know, ZJ Czupor, our former vice president, current president of Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers. And his topic tonight is your book is about what? And the presentation, as we said in the newsletter about the sobering news, the publishing industry, what we as mystery writers can do to break through the clutter and flotsam of competition. Rocky Mountain Mystery Writer member ZJ Czupor will enlighten us on the trends in today's publishing world, 3 ways to succeed in today's marketplace, and how to attract and engage readers, and how to master the things we can control. And that is something that no matter what we're writing, what genre, what length, those are all issues that are important. Let me hit you with a little bio. And again, many of you already know CJ, but he spent more than 30 years in one of the top marketing and PR firms in Denver with his wife, Marta, who many of you also know. And they formed the InterPro Group and have done held news conferences at the Washington Press Club, play stories for his clients in the New York Times, Washington Post, USA Today, CNN, Associated Press, and on. Really impressive group of companies that he's worked with. CJ writes thrillers, mysteries as Zoltan James, and also writes nonfiction under his own name. And he has some wonderful poetry haiku books out. If you haven't picked one up, go to Amazon and grab one. He was born in Osterode, Germany. Is that how you say it? To Hungarian parents who immigrated to the US when he was 20 months old. He grew up in Lawrence, Kansas, and of course now lives in Denver with wife and Marta and rescue collie. What's your collie's name?
London.
London, all right. He's a beauty. He writes from a stand-up, sit-down desk where he also dabbles in short stories, haiku poetry, as I mentioned, narrative noir poetry, and nonfiction work about the lives of famous mystery writers. His thriller novel, Cut Right Through Me, which he has on Substack right now, and his feature On Tour with Dead Writers, appears monthly on Rogue Women's Writers blog. CJ is proud to be represented by Terry Wolf, founder and owner of AKA Literary Management. And I didn't tell you also, that's my new agent as of this week. So CJ.
Thank you. Great to see everybody. So tonight I thought I'd give you a little bit of a look at the publishing industry and how mystery writers fit into this industry, and then talk about what are the things that we can control to help us publish and promote our books. And I actually gave a similar presentation like this to my agent, Terry Wolf, and her other clients. We did this on Zoom back in March, but I've reconstructed the whole presentation to adapt it more for mystery writers. There's my wife, Marta, and London, our rescue collie. He's actually our 4th rescue collie. And since we've had our business, every one of them has had a title, because Marta and I were both principals in our company. And so all of our collies have been director of security. And every year we have this running gag where we vote for employee of the year. And every year Marta wins, and she's won like 30 years in a row. And the dogs have always voted for her and never me. So that's been our running gag at home. And we've had a great time doing that. Another little background, I have a degree in journalism from the University of Kansas, where I grew up in Lawrence, Kansas, and moved out here to Denver in 1975 to go to DU to get my graduate degree in mass communications. And at the time, I really didn't know what I wanted to specialize in, but I got the bug with screenwriting and went out to Hollywood for a few weeks, interviewed a lot of producers and directors, and I wrote my master's thesis on the art of writing a screenplay and how to promote it. And of course, everything I learned back then is so different from today that I would be terrible at trying to teach you how to write and promote a screenplay today. Needless to say, it never got picked up anywhere. And after school, with debts of $8,000, I decided I better go back to work. And so I went back into the PR field for many years before we started our own firm. And I didn't really start seriously writing fiction until 2008. That's a whole other story, a whole other hour that we won't get into. So we're going to talk about publishing trends, a little bit about both traditional and independent, and the competition for mystery writers. And it's not exactly what you might think, and we'll get into that. And then we'll talk about the only things that we can control. I'm going to be referring to a lot of numbers and statistics. I'll give you the lay of the land of the publishing industry. But before I go further, I want to give you a caveat. And you may be familiar with this. There are three kinds of lies: damn lies, and statistics. And the reason I'm showing you this is I'm going to show you some numbers and statistics, but the caveat is take it for what it is, because they're only a snapshot in time. And I've tried to get as much current information as I could for this presentation. But just know that the numbers that you see and the trends that you see might be totally different next year. And there may be some aspects that won't show much change at all. But at least what you see tonight will give you a good glimpse of the publishing industry and how we fit into it. From what I could tell, Mark Twain has been attributed to saying this quote, but so has Benjamin Disraeli, and so have been about a dozen other people before them. So I couldn't find out who exactly said this, but I do like it and thought it was quite appropriate. And also, I would add that Eddie Murphy, the great comedian philosopher, once said, the only advice I would give anyone is don't follow my advice. So keep that in mind as you hear what we go through. So when I was consulting with clients, we would start by examining the universe that company or that nonprofit operated in, because we wanted to know the lay of the land. We wanted to know what was the competition, who was the audience, how could we position our company or organization against the competition. And I think many of those principles apply here to us as writers. Hopefully you'll begin to get an appreciation for this, because all day long, every day, we're constantly making choices. Gee, should we go to lunch to McDonald's or should we go to Burger King? Should I buy Nikes or should I buy Adidas? Should I buy a Ford or a Chevy? Maybe I should get an electric vehicle or a hybrid. These choices there are thousands and hundreds of thousands of them that we look at every day. I think the same applies with a book. Do I want people to read my book, or would they choose Bruce's? Or would they choose Barbara Nicholas's book? There's so many choices out there. And we'll talk a little bit about how we can drive that reader to reading your book. So annually, the publishing industry produces about 4 million titles, and the industry is worth $26 billion. The publishers are doing quite well. Out of that 4 million titles, 2.3 were self-published titles. And that represents about 9% of the total industry, worth a little over $2 billion. And last year, 789 million books were sold, and that's both fiction and nonfiction. This is a picture of Mile High Stadium here in Denver. It seats roughly 76,000 people. If you took those 4 million books, it would fill Mile High Stadium 1,708 times. That's the universe we're competing against. And that's fiction, nonfiction, and everything. The genre leaders by sales are romance with 1.4 billion, crime mystery thriller, that's I think where we would fall, is 728 million. Science fiction fantasy is 590 million in sales, and horror at 80 million. I've rounded those numbers up because if you find these numbers, you'll see it's like 79.6 million, but I thought it'd be easier to round it up. So the best-selling books of 2022, number one was It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. She sold 2.7 million units. The number two book was also by Colleen Hoover, which was Verity. And as of this past February, she had 6 of the top 10 books on that list. This is Colleen Hoover. She's somebody you might want to take a look at. She's 43. She writes what's considered romance mysteries and a young adult fiction. So far, she's released 24 books and sold 20 million units. She self-published her first book, which was called Slammed. It got good reviews and ended up on the New York Times bestseller list. And this was in 2012. At that point, she quit her job as a social worker and began writing full-time. Today, she has 1.1 million followers on TikTok, and her hashtag, Colleen Hoover, has over 3 billion views on that app. According to the New York Times, as of October last year, she had sold 8.6 million copies of her books. That's more than Dr. Seuss, more than James Patterson, more than John Grisham combined. She's under contract with Hachette, Simon & Schuster, and Amazon to publish 6 more novels in the next 5 years. Interestingly, the New York Times Book Review and the New Yorker ignore writing about her, even though she's a New York Times bestseller. And it's probably because some critics have panned her and they call her writing trauma porn. But she's most noted for her unusual plot twists, and that's why she's so popular. So the top-selling mystery writers of last year are listed here, and I just wanted to point out a couple. Craig Johnson at number 6. He's a member of our chapter here at Mystery Writers. Number 3 is Robert Galbraith. You might recognize that's the pen name for J.K. Rowling, the Harry Potter series. That's her Cormoran Strike series. Number 5 is a continuing series, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Since Steve Larson died, it's now picked up by Karen Smirnoff. Number 9 is James Patterson, who appears on a lot of top 10 lists. And this is a continuation of his Alex Cross series. And guess who shows up at number 10? Agatha Christie. Isn't that amazing? So this is a novel with a movie tie-in called A Haunting in Venice, which is loosely based on her 1969 novel called Halloween Party. And I think it's in theaters now. It's coming out. For the first year sales of new titles, about 6.7% only sell more than 10,000 copies. A little over 12% sold more than 5,000 copies. A little more than a third sold more than 1,000 copies. And this is the number that surprised me. The average book sells less than 300 copies over its lifetime. And the 1,000 number over a lifetime includes all hardback, paperback, ebook, and audiobooks combined. That's the average. Pretty sobering numbers. So in the indie publishing, they have 3,500 categories. And the reason that is that they can cross-pollinate genres with indie publishing. They don't have so many select slots like we have in brick and mortar stores. The sales are down, but they're still higher than they were in 2019. And the global indie market is worth $92 billion for the indie publishing industry. Juvenile fiction numbers are up 11%. Young adult fiction is up 38%. There are 2 million creators in indie publishing making 6 figures and more. Jeez. 13.7% of those authors make their sole income from writing self-publishing. Some of the downside is it's costing more now with increases in paper and packaging, cost of labor, print books, and print-on-demand books. And as you know, self-published authors have to do it all. We can't go any farther without talking about the gorilla in the room, and that's Amazon. They handle 50% of all sales from the big 5 publishers. And they control 50 to 80% of all book distribution in the US. Amazon sells 300 million print books a year, and they sell 487 million ebooks through Kindle. Amazon also publishes 1,000 books through its own imprints, and it's home to 80 authors with 1 million readers worldwide. And Amazon pays out 520 million in royalties every year to 1 million authors who self-publish on Kindle. They pretty well control the market. In terms of earnings comparison, a traditional author will earn about $11,000 a year. And the indie author will average about $35,000.
Can you define your terms out there, traditional author and indie author?
A traditional author who's published by one of the big 5 publishers or a small or a medium publisher. And the indie author is someone who self-publishes. For mystery, thriller, and suspense novels, they're lumped together. 23.6 million books were sold last year. The big 5 publishers published 58% of all mystery and thriller novels. Self-publishers did 26%. Amazon 15%, and the small and medium publishers about 1%. I might mention that the top selling authors like J.K. Rowling and Nora Roberts pull in about $500 million a year. Stephen King's at $350 million. And these folks are in the top 1%. They're in a different altitude. In self-publishing, one of the top earners is Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian. You may remember that was a big book a few years ago. He self-published that to begin with, and he sold 5 million copies. And then he sold the film adaptation rights to his next book, Project Hail Mary, for $3 million. So he's doing very well for himself. And Hugh Howey, you may have heard of him. He self-published a book called Wool, and he was making 6 figures as a self-published author. L.J. Ross writes romance and suspense thrillers. She sold 8 million copies of her books self-published last year. But these are the outliers and not the average of the numbers that you saw earlier. Why people purchase a mystery novel? They start with the genre. They want to decide, do I want to read a mystery? Do I want to read nonfiction? Do I want to read horror? Second, they look at who is the author. And most loyal readers have favorite authors that they like to follow. The third reason they buy is the cover. And the fourth reason is equally all 3 factors up above. And then there's other factors like familiarity with the author, price point, and all those kinds of things.
How about the title?
That did not come up in those rankings. No. So the competition for us are other writers, are also entertainment choices that people have, and readers. There are 54,000 professional writers working in the United States today, and that's fiction and nonfiction. Probably includes bloggers and essayists and that kind of thing. We're also competing against other mystery authors. We're competing against debut mystery authors who are coming on board every year. We're competing against best-selling mystery authors. And we're also competing against dead ones like Agatha Christie, who keeps showing up in this. Here are the active writers who are currently writing mysteries. And it took me a little while to find these numbers, but Mystery Writers of America, our home group, has about 8,300 and some members. International Thriller Writers, 4,500. Sisters in Crime, 4,500. The Crime Writers Association in England has 800 members. Scandinavian crime writers, 150. And the Crime Writers of Canada, 125. Now, keep in mind, there's a lot of cross-pollination there among those groups. Someone may belong to all 3, may belong to 3 groups or a couple. And within those members, You have published authors, you have best-selling authors, you have debut authors, and you have members like we have in our chapter here who's still looking for an agent and trying to get published. So you have a wide spectrum of people who represent those groups. In the entertainment for competition, we're competing against time and money for gaming, online videos, TV watching, social media, movies, other things like concerts, festivals, and reading ebooks. And you can see on this chart, the 13 to 24-year-olds, their number one preference is gaming. 22% prefer that first, followed by online videos. Whereas in people who are 35 and older, their first preference is TV watching at 43%. So think about your own lives. You know, at night, do you want to curl up next to the fire and read a book? Or do you want to watch the next series of Bosch on Amazon? Or do you want to watch the Broncos who are playing tonight? You know, those are all things that eat up our time, and they cost money. And people are making choices constantly about that. The other competition is decline in readership. Among all adults, 27% read on average only 10 books a year. College grads are reading about 15 books a year, and that's down from 21 a year ago. Women are reading an average of 16 books a year, down from 19. Men read about 10 books a year with no appreciable change from the previous year. 18 to 34-year-olds read about 13 books a year. If you're 35 to 54, you're reading about 13 books a year. And 55 plus are reading about 12 books a year, down from 17. Competition among mystery readers, about 47% are 55 plus, 28% are 65 plus. So arguably, mystery readers are older.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for, older. 14% are 18 to 29, and 11% are under 30. So how do we break through all of this clutter? I mean, look at all these books. This is just one bookstore. There are hundreds of bookstores everywhere. Every town has several bookstores, a lot of books online, a lot of things we can't control. We can't control the publishing industry. I was in this room 2 weeks ago when Hank Felipe Ryan was here giving a presentation all day long to Sisters in Crime. She said when she wrote her first book, she was scheduled to speak in Arlington, Virginia at a nice bookstore and had everything laid out. And when she got there, her publisher had sent her books to Arlington, Texas. Things you can't control. Another time, she was scheduled to do a signing at a bookstore in Boston. And the day before, the Boston Red Sox got into the World Series. There was no one in the bookstore. She said even the staff and her husband were in the back room watching TV. I mean, these things happen. You know, agents die, editors die, your publisher goes out of business. Lots of things like this you just can't control. Independent publishing, it's run by algorithms. If anyone can understand those, I'd like to learn that. And you're also in charge of a lot of your own destiny with independent publishing. So you're a business person, you're a writer, you're a marketer, you're a book distributor, you're all of these things, you're an editor. Maybe you're a graphic designer for the cover, or you're looking for people to do all this, but you have to do all those things. Of course, anymore, most traditionally published authors have to do a lot of those things as well. The entertainment options we can't control. People are going to choose what they're going to choose and how they spend their time and how they spend their dollars. The decline in readership, there's not much we can do about that unless perhaps we can turn around our education system. And readership preferences. There are other genres to choose from. There's nonfiction to choose from, which Harry likes, I'm sure. And then there's global, economic, political, culture trends, advances in technology. We have no control over, and we have to accept that. But there are some things we can control. First and foremost is what and how we write. And we can control how we present our author bio. And we can control how we write about our back cover synopsis. And we can control our mindset. So what and how we write. I think it's critically important that we know and study the genre that we're working in and the subgenres, and study who's doing it the best. Who are the best sellers and why are they? Why are they always on that list? Or why are they always winning awards? How can we write our manuscript to fit next to the bookshelf to that top-selling author and know that our book stands up against the very best? Because that's the competition. Secondly, you want to hire a professional editor. I mean, most of us are darn good writers. Most of us are pretty good editors, but it's really important to walk away from the book that we've written and have an objective eye look at it. If you can find somebody, a good friend who's a good editor to read it, that's great. But you can expect to pay anywhere from $2,000 to $12,000 for a professional editor. But it's well worth it. I didn't get my agent until I hired a professional editor, and made a whole difference in the world. It just changed how I rewrote my book and how it came together. And then I was picked up. Before that, I'd been rejected about 30 times. It's like I have a spreadsheet. I kept track. And I hated to keep looking at it, but that's what those were the numbers I was looking at, and it kept climbing and climbing. And I figured out I had to do something different. And that's when I decided I had to hire an editor. Your author bio. This is really important. And it's something maybe we shouldn't dash out in a hurry. But this little piece of content establishes your authority. It introduces the reader to who you are, your background, and the awards that you've won. Gives your readers an idea of where you live or grew up. Convinces readers to buy your book. And it's an opportunity to have them link to your website where they can learn more about you. As an example, this is William Kruger's book, Lightning Strike. This is William. He was rejected by 36 literary agents who are all now gnashing their teeth. He said his first bookstore appearance, he was not a household name or a brand. He was there by himself. He was there with the bookseller and the bookseller's cat. No one else showed up. But today he has over 20 novels with over 2 million in print. He produces a book a year and he has a strong backlist. His debut novel, Iron Lake, in 1988, had a print run of 5,550 copies and has now shipped more than 375,000 copies across all formats. He then broke out with a mystery series with a standalone called Ordinary Grace that attracted a broader following for him. Then he spent a hefty portion of his advance to pay for his first book tour, and he met with small crowds. But he made great connections with booksellers on all those trips. Today, he draws more than 100 to 200 people everywhere he goes. When Atria, which is a division of Simon & Schuster, realized his books were selling, they started footing half of the bill for his travels. His genre is mystery, so he went to mystery bookstores, he went to Boucher Kahn, and he went to international thriller writers. He said he felt like he didn't become a success until after his 7th novel. And his books have been adopted by book clubs and community reading programs held at libraries across the country. He said, "This takes time, and perseverance is the name of the game." Before I got on Substack with my novel, I talked to a consultant. Her name is Sarah Fay. She's an expert on Substack. She said, if you're going to do this, you have to play the long game. And that means you're not going to get an overnight success. You're not going to get a lot of subscribers right away. You just have to be prepared that it's going to take a while. And that's borne out by what William Kent Kruger says and what I've heard from a lot of other authors over the years. Just hang in there. You got to be persistent and never give up. So this is William Kent's author bio. It says, I don't know if you can read this, I'll try and read it for you. It says, he's the New York Times bestselling author of The River We Remember, This Tender Land, Ordinary Grace, winner of the Edgar Award for Best Novel, and the original audio novella, The Levee, as well as 19 acclaimed books in the Cork O'Connor mystery series, including Lightning Strike and Fox Creek. He lives in the Twin Cities with his family. Learn more at williamkentkruger.com. I think this is a perfect example of the kinds of things you want to have in your author bio. But look at the authors in your genre and see how they describe themselves and see how you can adapt that to your own bio. And this was written, comes from Simon & Schuster. Now, the back cover of your book should tell the premise of your story, give an idea of the setting, idea of the main characters, a hint of the conflict, and testimonials if you can get them. So Kent has a great testimonial from Kristen Hanna, who's a New York Times bestselling author, and she said, an instant New York Times bestseller. This prequel to the acclaimed Cork O'Connor series is a pitch-perfect, richly imagined story that is both an edge-of-your-seat thriller and an evocative, emotionally charged coming-of-age tale about fathers and sons, small-town conflicts, and the events that shape our lives forever. Doesn't that kind of give you a flavor of the book? Just enough to make maybe want to take a more closer look. So if you can give more emphasis to your author bio, to your synopsis of your manuscript, and write the very best manuscript you can, then the last thing you can control is your mindset. I want to write the best book possible. And I think since I've been writing, when I first started writing my mystery, I thought, I'm gonna have a bestseller. I'm gonna do it the first time out of the chute. Because I know how this works. I know how to write a beginning, middle, and end. You know, I've written a screenplay. How different could this be? And then I realized how hard it was. And then I realized how much more I didn't know. And I went to a program put on by David Morrell, who was the inventor of Rambo. And he said, whatever genre you're writing in, you ought to know the history of that genre. And you ought to know who's writing in it, because that's where you're living. And that really struck home with me. And at that time, I was really interested in noir. And I thought, I don't know that much about noir. So I started digging into it, and I became fascinated with it. And I began learning where it started and who wrote it and how you write noir. And it helped me so much. But then on my journey, I realized, you know, I'm not getting to that New York Times bestseller list very fast. I have a lot more to learn. And I know we've all been there. So anyway, write the best book you can. That's number one. And if you're into self-publishing, write the most compelling book possible. Make sure you have a great cover and have good testimonials. And figure out the algorithms on Amazon and Kindle. Also know your audience. Who are your readers? You've gotten a little idea tonight of who reads mysteries, but find out who reads cozies, who reads historical mysteries, who reads detective novels. And then next, know why your book is unique. Okay, you got a mystery. There are 276 million mysteries out there. But what's unique about yours? You know the story. It's your story. Be sure you spend time on how you communicate your uniqueness your story's uniqueness to your audience. And know the value that it offers to your reader. Is this going to keep you up at night, reading, turning the page? Will you get some great insights into why families kill each other or why serial killers kill each other? Will you get some great insights about that? And then work on your website and make it really compelling. Don't make it average. There's a lot of websites of authors out there that are just okay. That's where people go to find out more about you. And they can find out other things that you read and write, where you're going to be. And the next, focus on your goals. If you want to be a New York Times bestseller, well, there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of luck that take place. If you're happy with just selling a few novels to family and friends, that's great too, if those are your goals. But your goals are your goals. Your goals are not Stephen King's goals. They're not J.K. Rowling's goals. Be very clear about that so that you're not out of alignment with your goals and thinking, well, I'm writing a middle grade mystery that'll appeal to a few teenagers. If that's your goal, great. But don't do that and then keep wishing I'm going to be a New York Times bestselling author up there with Stephen King. Be very clear about that. And only you can define your own level of success. A book's worth is not based on units sold. There are a lot of amazing books out there that don't sell a lot. But if a book reaches a few readers who are moved by it, then a lot of authors consider that a great success. So I hope I've given you some ideas of what kind of milieu we're operating in here. And I'm happy to answer any questions if I can.
That was terrific.
Yeah.
Yep, Pat.
So you showed there about the author, just the example a few slides back. And it gave the website, don't even type in this website. But what about putting a QR code on there? Anybody can generate a QR code for free on the web. Takes you right to your web page. But you also have to have a nice appealing professional web page so if they go there, it looks like it's probably a professional type.
That's right. That's a great idea.
But instead of having to type in WilliamKentKruger.com, there's just this little thing. Everybody in the last 3 years has been to a restaurant, they had no menus, you had to get out your phone.
Mhm.
The menu. In this case, you just punch your phone in, it takes you right to the web.
Everybody hear that? Okay. Well, Pat was recommending that in addition to your website, also have a QR code right there so people can immediately go to your website. And we're just seeing those more and more prevalent now. That's a great idea.
Where would we put those? I mean, you could put them on a business card, I suppose.
That's right.
Your iPad, that somebody would be there. I mean, I'm trying to think of places we would put
Mm-hmm.
such QR codes.
You put them on bookmarks.
On the book, don't you put it on the book?
Yeah.
Well, I think if you're self-publishing, you could put it on your own book. If you're traditionally published, you're going to have to figure that out with the publishing house.
But on, like I said, your business card, bookmarks and everything.
Yeah.
that you have.
Yeah. Business card, bookmarks.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a question. If you guys appear that no QR codes for me, oh my gosh, how do you do that?
Go into Google or any search engine
Okay.
and you type in QR code generator.
Oh,
There's a
then,
whole bunch of them out there and it'll give you, and they're generally free. Some of them want you to pay for it, but most of them it's free.
okay,
If you know what that address is, there's just a field in there and you type in that address. It generates a JPEG or PNG file.
so you type in like
You
WilliamKentKruger.com.
you type that in the little
Okay,
field on your computer and it pops up this kind of single square, you know, it's
right.
and download that image.
Do you have like a URL to your website, for example?
Like that, WilliamKentKruger.com.
Yeah. So for those of you may not have heard, Barb asked, how do you do that? Pat said you can Google QR generator,
QR
code generator, and it'll give you information on how you can create that.
One
Yes.
bit of advice I have on that, if you are using a QR code generator that you find online, do a little bit of research about it, because there are some that will generate a QR code, but they'll also track or otherwise interfere with the traffic that is being followed by that QR code. So there are some out there that are unscrupulous, some out there that are terrific. So Google around, but do some research.
Okay, thank you.
So you can find reviews of those, or something that would tell us what is reputable.
That's right.
Okay.
The second part of my question is, you said about an editor. Or hiring a professional.
Editor.
How, is there, I know, well, like, for example, Publishing Marketplace is really reputable and looking for agents, publishers, editors as well, or what do you recommend to look first for before you would get someone like that?
First, I would talk to people in this room for recommendations,
Okay,
or other members and mystery writers.
okay.
There is a source for professional editors. I think it's available online.
Briefly has professional editors, but I don't. think that's a good idea.
I think it's best if you know somebody who's
Yes.
been edited by that person. Word of mouth is strong. So
I've had the Independent Authors Alliance recommended to me as a source for that information. But there again, I consider that a starting point that I try to find people who had worked with any editor I was considering.
The other thing you can do is go look at the books that I edit.
Yeah.
For that woman and see
Yeah.
the quality of that.
Yeah. Harry said also look at the books that you're reading and look in the acknowledgements to see who edited that book.
Thank you.
But be prepared to spend some money.
Yeah, that's it. That's
Matthew.
This is a little bit of a challenge to something you presented here, which is, and I left this up on the screen. You've got as your example of a good author bio, William Kent Kruger, most of whose bio is his 24 award-winning and best-selling books. That's not a hard bio to write if you've got 24 award-winning and best-selling books. Do you have any recommendations for somebody who's not yet there to what would make a compelling bio if it's a debut book, or if you've just had a couple of books out, none of them have been bestsellers? What kinds of things would people look for in a bio?
That's a great question. Thank you. What I would do is look at your own background. And if you have a background, let's say you're a computer engineer and you're writing science fiction. Well, I think that brings a lot to the table because you kind of operate in that realm and your mind kind of works that way. But if you have something in your professional background that's relevant to the story that you're writing, I think that's very applicable, and that sets you apart from most other people. So that's a good place to start. Also, you can say, I'm a member of Mystery Writers of America. I'm a member of International Thriller Writers. That says you belong to professional organizations and you're studying. You might mention if you've studied under an author, for example. I've studied, all-day workshops under Hank Felipe Ryan or Stephen King, whatever the case may be. Whatever you have that's unique to you, use it.
So would it help if we did say arrested or going to prison? That sounds like something.
That could be.
We don't have that. We need to get
Great,
that in our
great personal information. Yes.
And as you were giving that answer, it occurred to me, if you've spoken to groups and can say that you've presented to
Yes.
a chapter of Mystery Writers of America, that's a so if you've got a piece of subject matter that would make a good presentation for our group here, that's another reason to do it, is it becomes part of your professional bio.
Yeah. Or if you led a critique group, there's several things that we all do as beginning writers and debut authors that, put us into that swim. Yes, Sue.
In terms of the editing piece, if you broke, some of the best editing I've ever experienced as a writer is through my Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers Critique. I mean, smart, motivated, caring group of people. I've just learned just tons through that group, and have used them as editors for everything I've written, really. It's fantastic. That's not to say you still might not need additional editing, but boy, they're a great place to.
I mean, one sample. That is that, don't rely on what your best friend, your husband, your wife, your kids, your neighbor tell you. Just aren't. Don't pay any attention. If they know what they're talking about, they're trying to make you feel good.
Yeah.
To me, the bottom line I have is the only editor other than the publisher is somebody that I pay for. Paying for the truth, paying for the heart and bundle. If you get it for free, bottom line.
That's good advice. I don't know if you could hear Harry, but he said, don't rely on friends, neighbors, your mother, your sister. Pay for it, get a professional. When I was in journalism school, the first rule was, if your mother tells you she loves you, get 2 more sources. So I think that's good advice, Harry. I would add to that is, in terms of the mindset, we have to start recognizing that we are professional writers. So we have to treat what we're doing as a professional craft, a professional business. And professionals rely on other professionals. So if you can afford it, pay for a good editor.
If you're drilling down into subgenres, you figure out whether you have a market and product and whether there's an audience. How far down in that can you drill? I mean, if you say from the manuscript that I think you rewrite, a former pacifist, 26-year-old female that ends up coming out of the Spanish Civil War, ends up trying to solve a Nazi plot. I mean, there's a lot of things in there. You have a female protagonist. You also have a spy thriller, things like that. I mean, yeah, it was definitely historical. And based on a true story. I mean,
Well, I think
how far can you figure out if your audience is larger than 12?
the question was how far do you drill down on your genre? But I think what you're describing is a historical mystery. And I wouldn't worry too much more about that, because frankly, if you think about it, every story is a love story, or every story is a journey, or every story is a stranger comes to town or a stranger leaves town. It's not too much more complicated than that. But within our genres, we're going to have love affairs and all kinds of kinky relationships going on, subplots. But I think what you're describing is a historical mystery, and based on a true story, I think sounds pretty strong.
Some good keywords in there, like Nazis.
Well, it depends on how you use it.
I have a question about, I have 2 questions, but the first one,
Sure.
you had some numbers up there, and I was struck by one of them. It referenced, and maybe I misunderstood what it was talking about, 54,000 writers. And what was in that context? There's a lot more than 54,000 writers who are publishing these days with all the self-published books, right? I mean,
Well, 54,000 writers working, if you say.
It's working.
Working.
Yes.
It's
54,000 writers working in the US.
right. working
And that's a
professionally.
broad coverage. I think you mentioned podcasters and whatever, but this seems like a really low number to me when we're publishing 1 million books, or whatever the
Well,
figure was on Amazon. And not all those are, some of those are by the same author or
Right.
that sort of thing, but I mean, you gotta produce, a lot of authors to produce that kind of the numbers of books. I'm just curious where that came from. So
I don't have that source there. I think that is traditionally published
okay.
because the Amazon numbers are, 80 some authors are getting paid, but another million in there. So yeah, there's a lot more out there.
The other question I was going to ask is, and I realize this is a whole area to wade into. In general, what is your perspective on social media these days as to how that fits into helping you find your audience? Of course, part of it, and your audience is somewhere out there. Some of them are connected to social media. For example, TikTok has become a big thing for books, and I've thought about it for about 10 minutes and thought, this isn't going to work. This is, it's great for romance. It's a younger audience, so it's great for romance, and it's great for young adults. I mean, I think those two areas of authors do probably really well on TikTok. But I'm thinking, when you put up 55 plus is half of our readership, I'm thinking, well, it's not really probably worth it to spend much time doing TikTok videos, because I don't think there's an audience there for it. That's the kind of thing we need to go through. I'm just curious what your sort of overall perspective on social media outlets like that.
I think you're right. I think TikTok is geared to a much younger audience. And if that's what you're writing, then definitely. But if you're writing for mysteries that are more apt to be read by an older audience, and you're probably not going to get much following there. I have a different view of social media. I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, but I rarely post anything on Twitter or LinkedIn, mostly on Facebook, and it's now becoming an older audience. Here's the great lie. If we can be truthful here, here's the great lie, that social media is social. It's where you interchange ideas and you talk back and forth and you show, pictures of your cheeseburger and, your dog. And I've been guilty of that. And you can generate a following, but followers don't necessarily translate into buyers. And there's a saying in writing that says, bank beats rank. So selling your book is much more important than winning awards or being ranked in lists or having followers on social media. Harry.
That's also a criticism of Instagram as a site for books, and that is people who go to Instagram aren't looking for books necessarily. They might end up finding they're not going there looking for books. They're going there to play around.
Yeah.
Not to buy some following. I think that's a valuable distinction.
To me, it's a double-edged sword. Terry, my agent, says publishing houses and editors are looking at social media to find out about who you are. What kind of author are you? What kind of person are you? Are you somebody they'd like to work with? So that's, I think, is a pro. It's a place to have a platform, a presence, if you will. But I just don't think it's a great way to spend your time to try to sell your book.
The only other side of that is that you're trying to get ranked on Amazon. You're trying to get noticed on Amazon. And a lot of that activity out there, like on Instagram and TikTok, Amazon measures that stuff. with their algorithms, that's what they're doing, and the more activity they see out there, the more likely they are to use that whole SEO.
They read each other too, you know, if you have people like you in one of them, they're more likely to fill it with the Amazon. And also there is that, what you said, that social media where people get their news these days. That's where we learn things. We don't really go into in-depth reading or researching. Oh, it's just like the highlights of the, you know, news. Oh, something happening now. What do I know anything about it? The whole thing.
Well, and in today's world, because we have shorter attention spans, there's this unwritten rule that you need to have your product or your brand in front of somebody a minimum of 20 times. Minimum. Used to be in the 1970s, you had to be out there 7 times. And then in the 80s, it became 12 times. So now it's 20 plus before people even begin to make a decision to buy. So perhaps there's value in social media there to get those kinds of impressions. When I was doing public relations for clients, they would require an activity report, and they wanted to know, was our activity actually generating publicity for them? And we gave them very specific numbers on readership in newspapers, viewership on TV stations, and so on. And when you added those potential audience numbers up, oftentimes they would get to be really high numbers in the millions. But I always caution every one of my clients, I said, these are potential viewers, these are potential audience numbers, because a television show might show your event or promote your product, but it may only be on there less than 15 minutes. And somebody may have gotten up to go to the bathroom and missed that story. Or somebody skipped over it in the morning paper, or they didn't read the morning paper when you were on the front page. So it's a potential number. And I think it's the same with social media. These are potential numbers, and people are trying to put great emphasis on it, because what else do we have to measure? Mike.
I wonder about affinity groups, for want of a better description. Let's say you're writing cozies. They're cooking oriented, they're gardening, something like that. You know, get involved with the American Gardening Society or something like that. And then every now and then, you might just fill in a little blurb, how can you tell the difference between whether someone's killed with a rake or a hoe? You see what I'm getting at. And you can do this on like all sorts of categories in there, but it's soft marketing rather than hard pitching.
Right.
You sell, you do the best selling to your friends, and you cannot have 45,000 friends on Facebook that are going to buy your book.
Yeah.
But what you can do is have friends in your affinity group that become your fans, and that's, I don't know. Has anybody done that successfully? Seems like it would work.
I think it's a great idea, because the reason I say that is I'm listening to all this, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I just was telling Lucy, I'm not on Facebook, so I'm probably, that's a bummer, right? Yeah. Is that how everybody sees who you are and everything like that? Okay. Okay.
Do you have a website?
Huh?
You have a website?
Oh, yeah, I do. Oh, I have an active website.
Yeah, you need to.
So get on Facebook too.
Just the other thing that hasn't been mentioned is, and I just feel like, is how big audible books are now. they're estimated to be 30 to 40% sales, which is a real shock to me. I don't listen to books. There are people, that's what they do. They don't buy ebooks, they don't buy hardcover, they buy audibles and running, gardening, driving, they're listening to them constantly.
You know, I've found too, there's a lot of people that have learning differences. And they love to read but can't comfortably. So that's another group who really loves hunting.
Actually, I'm one of those people.
Okay.
My eyes are wacky, and so, I've read all my life, but about 5 years ago, I just couldn't do it anymore. So, so basically, everything I read now is audio. So there are a lot of people, especially, we're all boomers here. It's, we're all getting children. And we're the ones who read. So yeah, so I think that's a valid. I think that it's a valid point. I think that audiobooks are probably really important.
Just for the last point on that is that if you're publishing your own books on Amazon, you should also have them up at home.
Sure.
Because
Yes.
there's no reason not to. I mean, it's real difficult to deal with those ACX people. You get them up there, and the books that I've published in the past, I have the rights back. So I've got them all up on Amazon and all up on Audibles. Yeah, it's a substantial number of things.
That's smart. In case anybody didn't hear this from Zoom, we've been discussing about the importance of audiobooks, and Harry is correct. Sales are really climbing fast for audiobooks, and it's just another platform to get your story out there. So do keep that in mind too. So
Can you talk a little bit about what you've been doing in terms of Substack and the whole serialization movement and what your thoughts are on that?
sure. I had been studying Substack for about 2 months, following people and trying to understand how it worked and whether or not that was the right platform to experiment with. And I decided I had a finished novel and wondered if I could maybe go back and publish it in a serial form. And I had written it in third person, but Sarah, the consultant, said, you really ought to consider doing it in first person because the stories show up in your email inbox and you can decide when they show up. So I have them scheduled every Tuesday and Thursday. And so on one screen, I'm going back each chapter, rewriting it in first person. Then I upload it to Substack. I edit it a second and third time there. I'm still changing it. I add a graphic to every chapter. And you want to be careful if you're using photos, make sure you have the rights for those photos. But I now have 60 subscribers and I've been doing it for a couple of months. I have 11 who decided they wanted to pay. I didn't encourage that. And I'll be very honest, I've made $580 so far. Nothing to write home about, but it's very nice that some of these people have wanted to support me financially. And like Sarah said, and like Harry and others have said, this is a long game, so you got to be in it for the long time. But before I did, I also talked it over with my agent to find out and make sure that she was in agreement. I wasn't doing anything that would be in cross purpose as to what she was doing. And she was very encouraging. And she said, yeah, do it. Let's see how it goes. And so I've been getting some great feedback from readers. And
You can still market your book, right?
Yep. The other thing with Substack is you own all those email addresses. So if I decide to walk away from Substack someday, those email addresses belong to me, and I can put those into my newsletter or whatever I want to do. Also, I retain all the rights to my book. So I can maybe give it to my agent to publish. I can self-publish it to see what happens. But this,
Like a total win situation.
yeah, this way I'm getting like, yeah, this way I'm
Do
getting
you pay a fee to?
free.
to-
It's free.
So they get some money some other way. I mean,
Well, for those who subscribe, I keep 90% of all the dollars.
So this is a bit like podcasting.
Well, no, but they do offer a podcast feature.
No, I mean, in its structure, I'm not talking.
Oh,
about-
structure?
Yeah,
Well, yes and no. I mean, there are others on Substack who publish essays and, political viewpoints, and there are some best-selling authors on there that are talking about their latest works, and giving information on how to write. Really good stuff there. There's some others who are doing serial, like I am. But yeah, it's similar to the podcast where you have a short amount of time where you get a bit of information.
And-
Maybe you get some more next week and so on. Yeah,
and
correct.
there's a subscription. Well, yeah,
correct.
interesting.
How many subscribers does Substack have? What's their total audience?
I don't know, but I think it's several million.
now you would do new material on there. You wouldn't take an old book and serialize it and so on.
Why not?
Print.
Why
Well,
not?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's what that really is open for.
I mean, you have several mysteries, that would lend themselves to maybe a serial version.
I
Like,
didn't know since you can buy the book on Amazon for $2. And I didn't
Right.
know, or you're catching a Substack audience that doesn't know your book is on Amazon, and so
probably you could, yeah.
just curious.
I would look into it.
Yeah,
Is it like a YouTube?
No, it's all written form. But yeah, it comes into your email. You subscribe, it's free, and it comes into your email inbox.
no, I think that's the one that I came across this 3 or 4 months ago. I've been writing some short stories of late, and not a novel. I think it was on Substack, where whoever it is, I forget what the group is, but they post a short story once a month. Or no, you can enter your short story, put it in there. I'm not exactly sure how they do this, but so they have a pile of readers, and I don't know if it's by reader vote or what, but they pick the book or the short story, and that becomes the one that's, I mean, they earn sometimes several $100s for that short story. They got picked that particular month, and they said they're doing one a month. And I don't know all the details of that. I've sent a story or two in, and so far hasn't been picked for anything. And I'd say I'm not sure. I don't belong to it as a reader, so I'm not quite sure how that all works. But I'm pretty sure it's on Substack. So that's, in essence, there is kind of a similar thing. Putting a story up and or a bunch of stories, and then people pick the best one and they like or whatever, and get money.
Yeah, and you still have to do a little bit of work to try to get some readers. You want to email your family, friends, your mother, and make sure they're reading. You want to use social media, and the nice thing about Substack too is every time I post a chapter, it takes the visual that I used for that chapter. Let's say it's a BMW, so I get a visual with my little teaser over it, which they produce. It just comes into my inbox. I copy it and I put that on Facebook, I put it on Twitter, I put it on LinkedIn, and I say, new episode now live at my address, and a little other teaser. But it helps me promote my own work.
Is the visual mandatory, or is that something you've
No.
chosen to do?
That's what I've chosen to do that.